In today's notes, we'll be looking at the presidency of John F. Kennedy and his system of domestic reforms known as the New Frontier. John F. Kennedy defeated Richard Nixon in the presidential election of 1960 by the smallest margin in nearly 100 years. His victory ushered in a new era in the White House. JFK was young and handsome. He had a beautiful wife, Jacqueline, and two adorable children, Caroline and John. His presidency was often compared to the story of Camelot, the idyllic story of King Arthur's court. The American public followed their every move and imitated the president and first lady. When people heard that JFK could read 1,600 words a minute, thousands of people enrolled in speed reading classes. Women imitated the first lady's fashion, and the media reported on them like they would today's celebrities. After his election, John F. Kennedy selected his cabinet. When doing so, he decided to select young intellectuals and businessmen, people that had been extremely successful in their various fields. For example, his cabinet included a dean of Harvard, the president of the Ford Motor Company, the president of the Rockefeller Foundation, a charitable organization, and it also included his brother Robert, who was becoming a well-known lawyer at this point. Individuals that had excelled in business, or in leadership, or in education. Because John F. Kennedy had won the 1960 election by such a small margin, he had no clear mandate. That means that he didn't have overwhelming support to pursue a number of programs or interests initially in his presidency. So instead, he had to build that support or gain that support once becoming president. One of his first objectives was to boost a sluggish economy, and he did so through deficit spending and tax cuts, meaning that the government spent more than it was actually bringing in through taxes. Because of this extra spending, Kennedy was able to build the national defense by spending a lot of that money on defense and on military. He also used some of the funding for international aid through a program called the Alliance for Progress. The Alliance for Progress was a program that offered economic assistance to Latin American countries. He also promoted and really started our space program. And he initiated the Peace Corps, an organization that took American volunteers and placed them overseas in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and encouraged them to volunteer and help build underprivileged countries. While progress during this time was being made in new frontiers like space exploration and international aid, many Americans still suffered at home. In 1962, author Michael Harrington brought this to the nation's attention with his book, The Other America. In this book, Harrington profiled the 50 million Americans that scraped by on less than $1,000 a year. The number of severely poor in the United States shocked most Americans. Eventually, President Kennedy was persuaded to do something about it. He called for a national assault on the causes of poverty and pushed through, or began to attempt to push through, the Civil Rights Bill, which called for a $10 billion tax cut, along with a number of other programs to assist those in severe need. Before President Kennedy could gain enough support for the passage of the Civil Rights Bill, he and his wife traveled to Dallas, Texas, and on November 22nd of 1963, while they were parading through the streets of Dallas, Texas, President Kennedy was shot and killed. News media kept the nation informed, and in ways unlike any other time previously, people were fixed to their televisions following the constant news coverage. The coverage was live, and this was such a new ordeal for news media that newsmen were actually receiving the updates on paper copy during the middle of the telecast. There's a famous video of Walter Cronkite being passed a message with new information as it's coming in. Because of a bizarre change of occurrences that happened surrounding the assassination, some people started to wonder if there was more to it, started to suspect that maybe there was a conspiracy. To address these questions, the Warren Commission investigated and concluded that Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald, had shot the president while acting completely on his own. 3 days later, on November 25th, all work stopped for Kennedy's funeral as America mourned its fallen leader. The assassination and televised funeral became an historic event. Americans who were alive then can still recall what they were doing when they first heard about the shooting of their president. What Americans did learn from the Kennedy assassination was that their system of government is remarkably sturdy. A crisis that would have crippled a dictatorship did not prevent a smooth transition to the presidency of Lyndon B. Johnson. In a speech to Congress, Johnson expressed his hope that from the brutal loss of our leader, we will derive not weakness, but strength. Not long after, Johnson was able to drive through Congress the most ambitious domestic legislative package since the New Deal.